Welcome to the WalterFootball.com podcast. This is episode 287. We're talking about the AFC North and the NFC North, our season previews for those divisions. Joined once again by Jacob Camenker. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing great. As I was telling you before the broadcast, I went to the driving range for the first time in like 4 years yesterday. So if you happen to notice me move and grimace at all on this broadcast, just know that my back is not happy with me for going the range. We're still trying to recover from that and bounce back. But I'm excited to talk some football, doing the AFC and NFC North today. And hopefully I'll be able to sit as still as possible in this one.
Well, speaking of bad backs, I was telling you before we started recording that my wife wanted to buy me golf clubs one Christmas. And she was like, "Oh, take a practice swing, just no club." And I did, and I threw out my back. So that was kind of the end of that venture. So I'm jealous that you were able to do so. I can't do that, but we can discuss the AFC North and the NFC North. We had the team with the best record in the NFL in the AFC North, the Ravens last year. They were 14-2, a very upstart team. You know, I think people expected them to do well with Lamar Jackson in the second year, but not that well. So do you see them repeating that success or maybe coming close to that at that level?
I think they may be able to come close to it again, but I don't think they're going to be 14-2 again. I think, like you mentioned, they caught some people by surprise. Lamar Jackson really burst onto the scene a bit. He was spectacular, and he deservingly won the MVP award and really changed the dynamic on offense. I think that opposing defensive coordinators are going to try to game plan more heavily against him and the run game this year. I know it's easier said than done because he's probably the best quarterback runner we've seen since Michael Vick was in the league. But the fact of the matter is there may be a way to stop Lamar Jackson or at least slow him down. And I think one of the areas that is going to potentially cause the Ravens to regress ever so slightly is the loss of Marshall Yanda on the offensive line. Yanda's been a perennial Pro Bowler, and now he is in retirement. The Ravens have some options to replace him. They drafted Ben Bredesen in the fourth round this year, and they have Ben Powers, who was a fourth round pick the previous year. They also drafted Tyree Phillips in the third round. He's either a tackle or a guard, depending on who you ask. So those three will fight for a role on the line. But no matter how you look at it, the interior there is not going to be as strong. So if teams can pressure Jackson from the middle a bit and get him to scramble towards the edge more, that at least may cause him a little bit of trouble, especially since the Ravens lack really dynamic receiving talents outside of Marquise Brown, who could make a big leap in his second year, provided that he can stay healthy. But the offense is still strong. They have Lamar Jackson, so you can't count them out at all. And the defense still looks very, very good. We saw them trade for Marcus Peters last year, and he really helped transform that defense. They've added Calais Campbell this offseason through a trade. They gave up basically nothing for him, and I know he's in his mid-30s, but he's still a dynamic pass rusher. So I like what the Ravens have done there. I think that they're going to compete. They should be favored to win the AFC North right now. I don't think they'll quite get to 14-2 again, but I think this team should win double-digit games for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think the major risk there is Lamar Jackson's health. He runs so much that it's possible that he can get injured. It's not surprising at all to hear Jackson say that he wanted to take a kind of a step back in running so much. He wants to throw a little bit more, which I think is pretty smart. And I do think that Jackson will improve as a passer. Like, he works so hard. Unlike we've seen like Robert Griffin and Vince Young come onto the scene as like scramblers, and they had great starts to their career, but they fell off. I got the sense that they didn't really work as hard as Jackson does as a passer. So I think Jackson will continue to improve. Marshall Yanda loss is huge. I mean, Jackson made such a big leap for a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons was the offensive line. He had a great offensive line in front of him. Now it's not bad or anything. Like, they still have a good line. It just won't be elite without Yanda, unless like Ben Bredesen is just like the second coming of Marshall Yanda. So we'll see. So I think the Ravens will take a tiny step backward, but a tiny step backward from 14-2 is still like 11-5 and 12-4. The Calais Campbell addition is huge, even though they lost Michael Pierce. it's a big loss, but then they got Campbell, so they made up for it. They drafted Patrick Queen to be an upgrade at linebacker. That was kind of like the one weakness in their defense last year outside of the edge rush. The edge rush is still a concern. They don't really have anything outside of one player there. But I think that Matt Judon, and I think overall, this Ravens team should win the division. I think they should be favored, like you said, and they are favored. They're minus 222, which I think is a fair price for them. So I would say they're going to go like 12-4 this year.
Yeah, I think 12-4 is about the right number. There are a few more specific players I want to hit on with this team. One more loss on the offensive line that may be a little bit understated is James Hurst. He'd been like a good super sub backup for them. He signed with the Saints this offseason because the Ravens went younger on that offensive line. You mentioned the weak edge rush. I could see them trying to upgrade that via trade because we saw them, again, trade for Calais Campbell and trade for Marcus Peters over the course of the last year. So I think they should be definitely looking at some of the weaker teams in the league that have pass rushers available. Like, I don't know if they're going to be able to trade for a Yannick Ngakoue type, but say like a team like the Redskins, who aren't expected to compete this year, they have a glut of talent on that defensive line. So if, say, Ryan Anderson finds himself on the outside looking in, he could kind of fit the mold in that 3-4 defense as a strong edge rusher with Alabama ties, which is something the Ravens have liked in the past. So those are a few guys to keep an eye on. And then one more thing, I believe the Ravens were one of two teams today mentioned as having potential interest in Antonio Brown, them and the Seahawks. So I believe Marquise Brown is Antonio Brown's cousin, so I don't know if that'll have any bearing on it. I still don't think Antonio Brown's going to sign anywhere, but my friend Dan messaged me at the start of this podcast. He is a Steelers fan, and he said if Antonio Brown signs with the Ravens, he is going to lose his mind. So hopefully for Dan's sake, that doesn't happen, but keep an eye on Antonio Brown because you never know. They may, if they think they have a strong enough locker room, they may take a chance on him.
Yeah, when I saw the news, I was like, the first thing I thought was like, the Ravens are just doing this to troll the Steelers, like, and yeah, I think that's kind of indicative of how most Steeler fans would feel. But I almost forgot that Marquise Brown and Antonio Brown are cousins, so like that could be another reason. So yeah, if Antonio Brown comes back, I assume it'll be with Baltimore. The other team is Seattle, which makes less sense to me because they have two good receivers. Like I don't think they need a third. It wouldn't hurt, but. Or maybe it would hurt knowing how bad Brown is in the locker room. But I think Baltimore will make the right moves, as you said. They'll find an edge rusher somehow. They have a great front office, so I assume that they'll fix the problem somehow. So we have the Steelers and the Browns, and I guess the Bengals as well. I think the Steelers and Browns are most likely to challenge for the number 2 spot in the division. And if Lamar Jackson goes down, obviously one of those teams will win the division. So which team are you favoring? I'm assuming gold and black because those are the colors you're wearing.
Yes, that is not exactly why I wore gold and black today, but I guess I'll play into that. I definitely like the Steelers. I actually had them picked to make the Super Bowl last year before Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. And I think if Roethlisberger had been healthy, I think they could have challenged the Ravens for the top spot in the division. I don't think they ultimately make it, but, they almost made the playoffs with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges playing quarterback. And that was really their one weakness. If you look at this Steelers team right now, they have very few weaknesses overall. The biggest question is, will Roethlisberger be healthy? And there's no guarantee that he will be. I know he's dealing with an elbow injury, so it can be hard for older quarterbacks to come back from that with full arm strength. But even if he can come back and just be an efficient passer and have more downfield ability than we saw from Hodges and Rudolph last year, I think he'll have a good chance to lead this team back to contention because their offensive line is very strong. They lost Ramon Foster to retirement, but they replaced him with Stefan Wisniewski, who has been one of the better backup interior linemen in the NFL for years now and is a very capable starter. So I like that. They have 3 good receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster is the headliner there, but Deontay Johnson and James Washington played well last year at times too. Their tight end situation's good. They added Eric Ebron to the crew, and while he's extremely frustrating in fantasy and can drop the ball, he has good athletic ability, and Roethlisberger should get the most out of him. I think the big question on offense is, will James Conner step up? And if not, which of these young running backs that the Steelers have will get the job done there? If if we're in the preseason and none of them kind of pan out, I could see them targeting a guy like Leonard Fournette in a trade, because none of these guys really look like the answer at running back yet. But, Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland Jr. could step up. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Again, they're very solid at every position. I think their biggest weakness before last season was linebacker, but Devin Bush Jr. came in and he played very, very well for them. So I think if he can continue to play well, he should be the glue that holds that defense together. And the trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick really did a lot to improve their secondary. So I think his second year and having a full offseason to digest that defensive playbook should only make him better, which is saying a lot because he did a ton to upgrade that Steelers defense last year.
Yeah, I think the Steelers are, they're somewhat easy to evaluate, but not completely, because we know they have a high floor because of their defense. Their defense was elite last year. Like you said, they almost got Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges to the playoffs, which is just remarkable. But the problem is, we don't know what we're going to get out of Ben Roethlisberger. He has the arm injury. Maybe he's going to be 100%, but he's nearing 40. I believe he's 38 right now. So it's going to be tough for him it might be tough for him to be 100%. Then again, he had a workout with Juju Smith-Schuster and the other receivers, and Juju seemed pretty happy based on something he put out on social media. So maybe Ben is 100%, and we'll see if that can last. He's had a long history of injury, and considering that he's almost 40, that should only get worse. But if he can somehow make it through the entire year and he's 100%, I think the Steelers are definitely one of the favorites to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Obviously, I would have the Chiefs ahead of them, but then after that, I think they're right there with the Ravens and any other team like the Colts. So I think they have the potential to be the second best team in the conference. We'll see what happens with running back. They have James Conner coming back, and they drafted Booger McFarland Jr., who has no relation to Booger McFarland Sr. for some reason. So I think the Steelers have a good chance to be a great team. It's all about Roethlisberger, and we haven't really seen any news outside of that Juju Smith-Schuster tweet. I forget if it was on Twitter or Instagram, but he definitely put something out, and he's very optimistic. So I'm willing to be optimistic. I think I might bet over their win total. We'll see if I can find a good bargain on it, and I think Steelers can get to 10-6, 11-5, maybe even 12-4.
Yeah, I have them pegged as an 11-5 team in my head. I just think, like you said, their floor is so high, and it would be higher for me if they had invested in a different backup quarterback. I don't understand why they're bringing Rudolph and Hodges into the year again as the backup. I would personally have signed a veteran quarterback, especially in an offseason where there were so many available. And Cam Newton's still out there, and I still have this gut instinct telling me that Newton's eventually going to sign with the Steelers and just say, like, hey, if Big Ben gets hurt, I can go out there and, have a chance to lead them in the playoffs. And this is actually tying into Parrot's question here. If Ben gets injured and the Steelers sign Cam, are they better or worse for the playoffs? I would say they're probably about the same. I might say it's a little bit of a downgrade just because I think Roethlisberger is a better pure passer than Newton. Newton has much better mobility and scrambling ability, but we don't know what the state of that is right now, given his foot injury and his history of foot injuries in the past couple of years. So I'd be a little worried about that, but at the same time, Newton would be a massive upgrade over Rudolph and Hodges, and hopefully they'll sign him or someone else to challenge those two young guys. And the most pointless note that you absolutely don't need to know, but I'm realizing this looking over their depth chart, the Steelers have 4 rookies on their roster that are juniors. Anthony McFarland Jr., Calvin Taylor Jr., John Houston Jr., and Antoine Brooks Jr. So I don't know what that means, but that's something that stuck out to me for no good reason.
Something I'll keep in mind for my mock draft in 2021. I'll mock all the juniors to them. So thanks for the heads up for that. I agree with what you said about Cam Newton. I think, I guess it really depends on his health, right? I mean, if he's 100%, then obviously he's not going to be much of a downgrade for Roethlisberger. In fact, actually, if you were to tell me right now, you give me 100% Roethlisberger or 100% Newton, I think at this, given their ages, I think I would take Newton by a little bit. If Roethlisberger was still like in his mid 30s or lower, or early 30s, I think I'd take Roethlisberger. But considering that Newton can still be in his prime if he's healthy, I think I'd take Newton. The problem is, like you said, we don't know if he can be healthy or not. But I think he makes a lot of sense, and Newton seems to be biding his time, waiting to see for a team to get to have an injury at quarterback, and when that happens, some team's going to be calling him for sure.